Hi, my name's Dr. Adam Booth and welcome to another locked-down edition of Quantum Source. Now, just before we begin today, I am aware that I'm a bit sunburnt, so let's laugh it up for a second. Should have done a Quantum Source on the benefits of wearing sunscreen, but I didn't, so let's move on. Today I'm out and about, just about to do some grocery shopping at Sutcliffe's, which is our local grocers. Now, I have to say that before lockdown, I didn't really use Sutcliffe's too much. Me and Jane would pop up to Farsley every now and again and go in there just because it was a nice thing to do. But in the lockdown world, it really has become my kind of supermarket of choice, if you like. And it's definitely something that I think we'll keep in our life. We've just got a nice feeling about shopping locally and supporting local businesses. And maybe this is the start of a larger trend throughout the population in lockdown. That's certainly an aspect that has been noticed by researchers in this field. So today's speaker is Dr. Danielle McCarthy. She's a senior lecturer in the Institute for Global Food Security at Queen's University Belfast. And she's done research that notices that maybe during lockdown we have started to engage with food in a healthier, maybe more sustainable, maybe more locally centred way, which has got to be a good thing to keep in the post-lockdown world, right? So let's hope that we do. We're going to be giving her a call in just a second once I've done my shopping. The other thing I'd say is that if you've seen any of these before, you know that there's always a recommended source to go with a set of fascinating facts, and usually they're alcoholic. But I'm sticking with the healthy food option today. Just to emphasise, this is some basil pesto that we made from a glut of basil leaves that we had in. So rather than chucking them away, you use up the food, make them into something else, and enjoy it with a tasty pasta. But you can go and get yourself whatever you want, probably something alcoholic. We'll give Danielle a call and we'll see you in a minute. Cheers. And hello, Danielle. Good afternoon to you.
Hi there, Adam. How are you?
I'm all right. My face is stinging a little bit, but I'm okay. And how are you?
Yeah, good. All's good here in Belfast. Yeah.
Cool. And first of all, give me a source that you'd recommend.
Well, I did give an amount of thinking to this, and actually I was inspired by my activities last night. I have to come completely clean, and in Northern Ireland I was perfectly within the regulations because we are allowed to meet up as 6 people.
Right.
So I took the amazing opportunity to meet up at 2 meters distance from a good friend, and we sat on the rocks at the beach, and I very much enjoyed some Brewdog beer.
Nice.
And it was a little treat because my friend brought it to me because she had tried it out. It was grapefruit and tangerine version, which was quite sour, but do you know what? It was lovely, but I would say it was both the drink, the company, and the setting that was just immense.
Right, yeah. The three things that go together really well, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So obviously you've got a slightly different lockdown scenario going on than what we've got here in England and in Leeds. But you have noticed some kind of nationwide trends in the way that we're kind of engaging with food and sourcing and shopping with food. So we're going to be exploring that a little bit, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my areas of passion, food, and then how that links to our health is something that I've been interested in for many years. So delighted. Thank you for inviting me to come and chat with you about it.
We're delighted to have you. Thanks very much for joining us. So, in terms of your background then, maybe you could just spell that out a bit for us, and then also what goes on in the Institute for Global Food Security in Belfast.
I'll come clean. I have quite a diverse career history. I work part-time at Queen's University in Belfast within the Institute for Global Food Security, and I also work very closely with colleagues in our Centre of Public Health within our medical school, because my interest area is very much that combination of what can food and the nutrients within it do for our health. And that obviously you have to look at it from a how is food produced safely and securely, both from a human health point of view, but also our school is very much interested in that whole environmental and planetary impact side of things, and exploring all of the different types of, from marine biology through to microbiology, all of the different elements of kind of what impacts the food cycle. And then colleagues over in the Centre of Public Health are very much interested either in those who already have health conditions that are diagnosed and how food can perhaps help with that, or more of my focus is how do you prevent people getting to those situations where they do have known health conditions, and how do you try and prevent those, and that kind of public health side of things. I guess I come to this role though from, obviously started off very much from the academic side of things, and did my PhD looking at different types of dietary fat and how they impact risk of heart disease and diabetes. I guess my driver at that point in my career was very much, how do I apply this knowledge? Eager to get out there, eager to see some kind of impact. So I actually, for the vast majority of my career, worked within research and development within the private sector. So at GlaxoSmithKline for a long period of time there, and then in different food manufacturers, really trying to help them with their nutrition and health and wellness strategies. So I guess one of the roles which I really enjoyed was whenever I headed up nutrition at Sainsbury's for a couple of years, which obviously, in terms of potentially being able to bring any of the science to real life was, it was incredible having that experience of how retail works and how fast it is, comparing that to, how long it can sometimes take us to do, one human intervention, trying to bring all of those things together, was a really brilliant opportunity. I guess, I always like to have that balance between how can we explore the science and what we know and generate that, but equally, so what if you can't apply that in a way that somebody even cares, then it's not as good as what it could be. So I kind of balance between those two things, and I know there's lots of debate around academics and industry. I always say, until I am willing and able to roll my own oats in the morning, I will always think, scientists that are looking at nutrition and health have to work with those that have great skills in producing food. So so I work between the two, but very much to focus on the research side, but always with a handle of, does this really matter to people who are going to choose this food? And if it doesn't, then food is not nourishing if it's not eaten.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's kind of moving it from sort of, the theoretical concepts behind this to actually something applied that impacts everybody.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about behaviours sort of before and during and then potentially after the lockdown period, whilst we don't like to generalise, just give us an idea of the kind of activities and the typical shopping habits that people might have used before lockdown.
Yeah, and do you know what, Adam? It's a massive question, that in and of itself. I guess there is, what is normal? Ask anybody what normal is, and it's full of diversity and complexity. But from what we do know from many studies looking at various different populations, is people tend to have their food culture, their food habits, their food preferences, and they are formed early on in life. They can change, but ultimately they tend to stick quite similar. So I guess it's not necessarily that there is a normal that everybody has, but everybody has their own normal, which tends to stick with them and go down the generations of their family. In terms of the UK and what we're currently eating, we are incredibly lucky from a kind of scientific community point of view, in that we have the National Diet and Nutrition Survey here, which really does every year look at a population that is representative of the different devolved nations across the UK and what they're eating. And it looks at people of all ages, from young children right the way through to older adults. And that really does help us as nutrition scientists and public health nutritionists understand what is going on, what choices are people making, and what impact does that have on the nutrients that they're getting. So in terms of what the normal, if you can call that the average, which we all know is there are lots of things on either side of that mean, but ultimately where do we sit as a UK in terms of our normal intakes, and I will always compare that then to what our recommended intakes would be. And some things we're doing okay with, but ultimately I guess the balance of our diet is not what we know for optimum health it should be. In that, the recent stats, the most recent stats from that National Diet and Nutrition Survey, across all ages and in men and women, boys and girls, the average is that we're not getting the recommended 5 portions of fruit and veg every day. So, if there's one thing, because everybody says nutrition is so complicated, there's so many mixed messages, I will always say, go back to, are you getting your 5 portions a day, and are they a variety of different colours? And if they aren't, then that is just something easily to work on. And if you're replacing something for something else to get your 5, you're likely going to be improving, how healthy your diet is. But, that's something that a normal habit is. We're not getting enough fruit and vegetables in our diets in the UK. Similarly, with oily fish, the recommendation is to have 1 portion a week. And again, the vast majority of people aren't getting enough of that. The other thing to bear in mind, specifically of relevance right now, is vitamin D intakes, which we know are not what they need to be. And in fact, Public Health England have come out with a recommendation that people continue to take a vitamin D supplement, and that's everybody, of 10 micrograms per day, especially during, this period of lockdown. Normally from March to September, actually, as you will have experienced, the amount you get from the sun does help, because our skin helps us synthesize vitamin D naturally rather than coming from food. But in winter months, we don't get that. It is something to be aware of, however, that dependent on cultural practices, the use of sunscreens and things like that, even whenever the sun is out, sometimes we, employ different factors that mean that we don't actually expose that much of our skin to vitamin D. So there is that recommendation out at this particular time to continue to take vitamin D3 and to try and get that habit. But it's not really, supplements aren't really a part of our food cultures, compared to, say, in Germany. There would be much more a part of their culture. But that's kind of our norm is our norm, and we're doing what we're doing. But from a nutrition point of view, we have to work on trying to switch and change that norm in whatever way we can to, up the fibre levels that people are having, up the different micronutrients that people are having. I haven't mentioned the obesity word, because that is, everywhere, big, massive focus. That has to be, is childhood obesity and how we do this. Obviously, we are consuming too many calories and too much sugar. I think it's such a complex issue. It comes to what you do, genetics. There's so many multiple factors that are important there, that I think that would be a whole podcast in and of itself.
Yeah, well, there's an open invite here for you on Quantum Source, so maybe we can revisit that later on. But just in terms of the kind of lockdown behaviour, then, what was it that you then saw during the lockdown that kind of alerted you to this change in behaviour that was going on?
Yeah, so, I guess we shouldn't be anecdotal, should we, as scientists? But ultimately, you look at your own experience and think, whoa, this is massively different. And this is going to have an impact on every single individual within the UK. 40% of our calories on average come from out-of-home purchases. So, food service, cafes, restaurants, etc. Right. And of course, in lockdown, they've all closed. Obviously, there are some now that are starting to adapt and recover and try and offer takeaway services, but there was a key period of time where everything shut down, and still even now huge amount more food is being consumed in the home. So canteens, school canteens, work office places, high street, takeaways, all of that as a kind of option for people was completely removed immediately. So we know that will then impact on what people can do. So, as scientists, you then see that as an opportunity to explore, okay, so behaviour has been prompted, there's been massive disruption, what's going to change? And and it will continue to change. And I think this is interesting, whereby the different sort of devolved nations within the UK are coming through this in slightly different ways, that again will provide different information for us, different contexts, and we'll see how different people behave, if they do behave differently or if they behave the same. So it is a moving feat, I guess, but ultimately you can look to understand, well, what purchases changed, what might that predict in terms of what people are doing? And, at the start, we saw huge amounts of dried foods, canned foods, all being purchased. Now, some are saying there was people that were really stockpiling. Others would say actually people didn't buy multiple packs of things, but just more people went and bought those categories that they would normally buy over a month in a particular 2-week period. And so that's where there was obviously big issues in terms of supply. Then sort of it progressed through to other types of foods that were being bought, and a definite switch to more frozen and canned foods, and flour sales were just, they saw dramatic increases. So that for me was something that, really piqued my interest, because ultimately flour is one of the scratch ingredients, as we would call it. So that, it's not that you can just eat the flour, although my daughter does try. Generally, it's not wise to just eat flour. You have to do something with it. And, we know
I noticed that as sort of a non-food expert at all, and that struck me as weird. That, I could understand why people stockpiled, if they were stockpiling, the pasta and the rice and the bread, but like the flour, even I noticed that as being a little bit strange.
Yeah, and I think, we don't yet know what did people do with that, because we've got the purchase data, but we don't have the in-home use data. So there's a number of different studies that are being kicked off to try and understand, so what do people do with that? Is it still sitting in some people's cupboards? Have some children just had snowstorms in their kitchen? Right. Or have people taken up making sourdough, and probably a mixture of everything. Time will tell us more about what has happened there, but I guess from what we already know in terms of, like, there was a study published quite recently that looked at, it was a survey of parents of 2 to 9-year-old children, and they looked at about 1,400 parents and asked them lots of questions about what they do in the home, and then looked at what their dietary intakes were, and there was an absolute clear association between those that do more scratch cooking, as it were. And I guess one of the terms that is used kind of within my field is this food agency. So that is people having an ability to go out and be able to buy the food and know what they want to buy, and then also have the skills, the time, the capacity, the environment in which to then prepare those foods. And if that food agency tends to be high and people are doing a lot of their own home cooking, then their intakes of fruit and vegetables are significantly higher. Okay. So I think ultimately, if we can see there are signs of the different behaviours of what people are buying might be leading to more home cooking, then we would predict that will hopefully actually have a positive impact on what people are choosing to make and eat at home. We're having to replace all of those, I myself am thinking all the packed lunches that we used to have, the office canteen stuff, you're walking down and getting a coffee and a bun or a takeaway sandwich or something. Everybody's doing that now at home, and we just have to wait and see what has the impact of that been in terms of nutrient intakes. Hopefully it has been good, and if nothing else, from a nutrition point of view, it's important to think about food is not just about nutrition. It is about, it's a connector. It brings people together. So we know from certain, studies that have come out and have been quite quick and fast, not necessarily hugely representative of the entire population, which we have to remember. There's not necessarily the case that everybody has got all of the money to go out and get all of these ingredients. But there's certainly stuff that is consistently showing people are cooking more at home. They're enjoying more time at the table, and they're enjoying more time together. And I know that's something, in our house we have experience, and I would say that's always been something that's been important to us, but even more so in this environment, you do have lunch together, whereas before you would have been at work and the children would have been at school. Yeah, sure. So that's a real benefit. I think, building those relationships because of food is an added benefit that food can bring to health over and above kind of the nutrition angle.
Yeah, I guess from a nutritional point of view, it's the kind of thing that you wish might have happened organically and through all the promotion that you were doing whilst at Sainsbury's, that people would take this on board. But they're presented with no other option than to actually engage with food in the way that you're suggesting, and so the long-term behaviour changes. But what you're saying there is actually it's really striking that you're suggesting it's not just sort of nutritional health. There's kind of potential health for communities and health for families and health for relationships with food, and that's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think, we're hearing a huge amount from the World Health Organization at the moment, and if you look at what their definition of health is, it is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Now, obviously, huge focus has been on disease right now, but a key part of that is health, is that construct of physical health, which we know the nourishment of food is very, very important about, but it is that mental and that social well-being. And I do think there are signs where because people have needed to get food, especially those who are most vulnerable and those who have been identified within society as, having to shield, having to stay at home, people have actively become so very conscious of how do we care for those people, how do we connect with them, and getting them their food has been a huge part of new connections. Either between, I know ourselves, we're doing shopping for various aunts and uncles, who of course you would see now and again, but now we are delivering their shops to them, and you're seeing them through the window, of course, but there's been dramatic shifts in the relationships all around food. Equally, and something that pleases me tremendously is this appreciation for key workers across across the health service and across the whole food service. That appreciation of we are all now more conscious. What are we writing on our shopping list? Is it going to be there? What needs to happen to get that food on our shelves, and why isn't it there? We're coming into massive peak harvest season here. Let's make sure that we do get all of those perishable items harvested for a start. There are key people that are involved in doing that. I think that's a brilliant thing that has come out of this, is that recognition that food doesn't just instantly appear, which I kind of think is where we were getting to, how we value our food. And I talk about myself in that as well. There's just expectations of instantaneous, food when you want it. And actually this has reset that dial somewhat, which I do think is important for many different people and in different ways.
That's a really cool link. I would say to the Quantum Source audience, check out Quantum Source episode 4, because it's all about supply chains and putting food on your shelves, and how kind of community spirits have really changed the way that supply chains work. So there you go. It's all linked up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So food connects. It connects everything.
There you go. Cool. So it seems like this is a really good thing that we ought to be trying to take out of the lockdown world and kind of maintain this post-lockdown. I suppose the worry is that, you said that people just go back to the habits that they always grew up with. Are you concerned that that might happen, or do you think that this could be a permanent change?
The $1 million question there.
Okay, but I have to do it.
Ultimately, we know it takes time for habits to establish and to change, and there needs to be motivation to do that. There's been huge motivation, for people to try different recipes, because they haven't had that variety of their food that we're so used to. So that has, helped stimulate new behaviours at home. I guess it will be, what has the experience been of that? So maybe some recipes that people cooked were not as successful as others, but there hopefully will be some, either to do with cooking or, the setup of meal times, the time taken over meal times, that people have thought, I am going to keep doing this. So, it won't necessarily be for everybody, but for some people it will have been a different experience that they've really enjoyed, and they want to actively choose to do that. Similarly, when we do go out to eat, it'll be that appreciation and that real value that you place on, it is a really special thing to go out, and so you won't necessarily take all of that aspect for granted, which brings me onto this whole conscious consumption, and mindful eating is something that people are getting more and more interested in within the scientific community and stuff. So I think it will ultimately come down to how every individual's different experiences, how that then can adapt, but ultimately I don't think we're going to have the rapid scale and pace that we had on behaviour change into this pandemic, coming out of this pandemic. So I actually think that hopefully will help people transition through. So it won't be the case that, well, all of a sudden we can all go out again. It will be slow and steady. So any habits that have been formed, hopefully that will help them be maintained, and certainly people who have taken up digital shopping or, direct contact with local producers and things like that, they form very emotive relationships there.
Yeah.
And we know, I know anything from sort of private sector work, that emotional bond is incredibly important.
Right, yeah.
But either driving conscious or subconscious behaviour. So a lot of that has been established. Equally within retail, there hasn't necessarily been that pleasant experience within the retail experience for people, because there has been a much higher degree of people feeling frightened being within buildings. So what that does, and how we shop and what our food environments are for the long term, I do think will change. What the impact of that change is, time will tell.
Absolutely. And I guess it's also so caught up in how other aspects of the post-lockdown life change as well. Are people allowed the flexibility to work from home, so they've got more time, that they do seek out the local producers, they are willing to dig out recipes for seasonal produce or something like that?
Yes. So a huge amount of time, and it pains me to think how much time working adults spend commuting, for example.
Right. Yeah.
And if we turn commuting to cooking, what would that do? If I could wave a magic wand, and I know we work at different companies, email-free Fridays and things like that. Replace a commute with a cook. I just kind of think that would be a brilliant intervention to do, and say, what is the difference? What happens there? So yes, again, completely, how our lives will change out of this, and the choices that we will be able to make, because we have demonstrated, a capacity to perform well at home, for example. Equally, some people actually may never want to work at home again, and we'll take that commute and we'll enjoy that commute and that peaceful train journey like they have never done before.
Yeah.
So much will depend, but I guess we will see. I think, ultimately there will be more flexibility there. I think the freedom that we will feel now, once we get that back and we come through, hopefully we can use that in the best way.
Absolutely. Hopefully that we can. I really, I've noticed in my own life that there are definitely things that I would, I'd change post-lockdown. There are some things I'm really looking forward to going back to exactly how they were before, but there's definitely elements that I would keep. And yeah, I'm sure that everybody is having experiences like that.
Yeah.
I would say thanks very much for your talk then, Danielle. It's really fascinating how you just peel back a few layers of that, and then you find how central it is to so much of what we do. It's really interesting stuff. So thank you very much.
It's been great. I've enjoyed discussing it. It's it's like anything, when it's your topic that you're just so interested in, you can always talk for hours. So it's been great to share some of the thinking, and I guess we have to watch this space.
Yeah,
really.
Sure, yeah. But I would say on that point that if anyone has any questions for Danielle, then I didn't check whether Danielle's on Twitter, but certainly you can put them to the Quantum Source Twitter account, and then either Danielle, if she is on Twitter, can check those out, or I can send them over. But that would be cool, right, Danielle?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I am on Twitter, but shall we say it's one of those works in progress in terms of finding the time and not getting massively distracted by it, because I love it, but it's a magnet, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
I'll be a question facilitator here. So
yeah,
cool. Right. Well, thank you very much, and I don't know if you've got any of those brew dogs left, but do enjoy them, and we'll say thanks again. So thanks very much, and bye bye.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye.
So thanks very much, Danielle. It's really amazing how interconnected everything is, with food right at the heart. And I hope that we can identify some of the good elements of lockdown life and potentially import them into post-lockdown life. I'm going to do two things now. Number one, I'm going to enjoy a bit of homemade pasta and pesto. Number two, I'm going to go and apply some after sun. But if you like that, then do keep your eyes peeled for the Quantum Source Twitter and Instagram feeds. We will be uploading more fascinating facts to entertain and educate you. Just remains for me to say that this has been Quantum Source. I've been Dr. Adam Booth. You've been great. Stay cool.